Have you ever been there? You're training your heart out, you feel like you're in the best shape of your life, and then bam, you get taken out by a simple cold. It's so frustrating, right? It feels like the harder you work, the more likely you are to get sick. Well, today, we're going to dig into why that happens and explore a potential secret weapon athletes are using for immune support. So, can exercise actually make you more vulnerable to getting sick? I know, it sounds completely backward. We all know that regular, moderate exercise is fantastic for your immune system. But here's the thing. When you're an athlete, you're not doing moderate exercise. You're pushing your body to the absolute limit. And that changes the game. You see, scientists have a name for this phenomenon. They call it the open window theory. Picture it like this. After you finish a really intense, long training session, your body's immune defenses are temporarily down. It's like the castle gates are left wide open for a few hours or even a few days, giving viruses and bacteria a perfect opportunity to sneak in and set up shop. This isn't just a feeling. It's a real physiological state. And this whole idea is visualized perfectly with something called the J-curve. If you look at the graph, on the one side you have a sedentary lifestyle, and the risk of infection is pretty high. Then, as you start doing moderate exercise, that risk drops way down. That's the bottom of the J. But if you keep going into really intense, prolonged training, the curve swings right back up, and your risk of getting sick increases again. The whole challenge for an athlete is staying in that high-performance zone without creeping up the other side of that J. So this open window poses a huge problem for serious athletes. And because of that, scientists have been on the hunt for ways to help close that window. And one of the most exciting things they found is a completely natural compound called beta-glucan. So what in the world is beta-glucan? Well, it's actually pretty simple. At its core, it's just a special type of natural fiber. Technically, it's a polysaccharide, which is just a fancy way of saying it's a long chain of sugar molecules all linked together. And you find it in the cell walls of really common things like oats, barley, mushrooms, and even the baker's yeast we use to make bread. Okay, but here is the absolute key, the most important takeaway. Not all beta-glucans are created equal. Not even close. It all comes down to their structure. The beta-glucans you get from cereals like oats have a simple, straight, linear structure, and they're great for things like lowering cholesterol. But the ones from yeast and fungi, their structure is totally different. It's complex and highly branched. And that unique branch structure is what allows them to interact with our immune system in a powerful way. This difference in structure is everything. It's the reason why the early research on beta-glucan in athletes was so confusing. It actually sparked a bit of a scientific detective story to figure out what was really going on. So the first big investigation into this kicked off with a major study back in 2008. They looked at endurance athletes, and everyone expected to see some clear immune benefits. But the results just made things murkier. Now, this study used beta-glucan from oats. Remember, that's the linear, straight-chain kind. And look at these results. It was a total wash. There was absolutely no significant difference in sick days or respiratory infections between the athletes taking the oat beta-glucan and those taking a sugar pill. It was a dead end. The oat stuff, for this purpose, just didn't seem to work. You can imagine the researchers scratching their heads, right? This result forced them to ask a really important question. Is the whole idea of beta-glucan for immunity wrong? Or did we just use the wrong tool for the job? What would happen if they tested that other kind, that complex, highly branched version from yeast? And that one question led to a complete breakthrough. As soon as researchers switched their focus to that highly branched beta-glucan from baker's yeast, the story changed dramatically. So fast forward to 2013. A study by McFarlane and his team looked at marathon runners. I mean, who knows more about that open window than them? And what they found was incredible. The runners taking the baker's yeast beta-glucan had a 37% reduction in the number of days they suffered from cold and flu symptoms after their race. 37%. And this chart just lays it out so clearly. Look at this. The runners on the placebo were sick for almost 6 days in the month after their marathon. The group taking the yeast beta-glucan, only 3.5 days. That is a massive difference when all you want to do is recover and get back to training. So, okay, we know it works. The next question is how? The same research team brought athletes into the lab to find out. They had them do a really tough cycling workout and then measured their immune markers. What they found was a 32% increase in a super important immune protein just 2 hours after exercise, right in the middle of that open window. And that immune protein was salivary IgA. The easiest way to think of salivary IgA is like the bouncer at the front door of your airways. It hangs out in your saliva, in your nose, and it's the very first thing that grabs onto viruses and bacteria to stop them from getting in. So the yeast beta-glucan was essentially making sure the bouncers stayed on duty, even when the body was tired and stressed. Okay, so the evidence for helping to close that immune open window is really compelling. But the story might not even stop there. Some of the newer research suggests that beta-glucan's benefits could go beyond just keeping you healthy and might actually help with performance and recovery too. Now, the first whispers of this actually came from foundational research using animal models. These studies let scientists peek under the hood and see mechanisms that are just way harder to measure in humans. And here's where it gets interesting. A 2013 study on rats found that, get this, oat beta-glucan, the same one that did nothing for sickness in human athletes, actually helped the rats with performance. It helped them run longer, it reduced fatigue markers. It really suggested that these different structures might have totally different jobs in the body. But of course, we're not rats. The billion-dollar question is always, does this stuff actually work in people? Well, a 2022 study decided to put it to the test with human athletes. And the results here were pretty clear-cut. They used yeast beta-glucan. After 4 weeks, the placebo group's grip strength, a great measure of muscle function, didn't change at all, but the group taking the beta-glucan saw a significant, measurable increase in their strength. This was a really exciting hint that the benefits might be broader than just immunity. All right, we have covered a lot of ground. The problem, the confusing early science, the breakthrough, and even some new stuff on performance. So let's just boil it all down. What are the key things you need to walk away with? Okay, let's recap. First, pushing your body hard creates that open window, making you more likely to get sick. Second, beta-glucans are a natural fiber that can help. But, and this is number 3, the source and the structure are absolutely critical. And fourth, all the strongest evidence for helping athletes stay healthy points specifically to that branched, Baker's yeast-derived form. And that kind of leaves us with a really exciting final thought. We know that beta-glucan starts its work by interacting with immune cells in our gut. This just hammers home how deeply connected our gut health is to our entire immune system. And it just makes you wonder, as we keep learning more about this gut-immune connection, what other amazing natural compounds are out there just waiting to be discovered that can help athletes perform at their absolute best?